So this is Tesla's new 2022 Model 3 rear-wheel drive. So previously this car was called a Standard Range Plus. Now the biggest change between this car and the previous gen car is that it has a new battery, an entirely new battery chemistry. Specifically, it has an LFP chemistry. And the biggest advantage of this battery is that you can charge this car to 100% every single day and it will not have any accelerated degradation. This is great because this car has a range of about 272 miles, and that means that you have the entire battery capacity to use at your disposal every single day. Now another big change is that Tesla actually upgraded the battery size in this vehicle to 60 kilowatt hours versus 55 like in the previous gen. And so that's how you get the range increase, and then also the fact that you can charge to 100%. This makes this vehicle a very good contender. So for the 2022 model, they have made some changes. The biggest one is due to the processor. They have now an AMD processor, which is incredibly fast, and it's so smooth using the screen and the UI, and everything loads so incredibly fast that it just makes your experience so much better, considering that's pretty much your only way of interacting with the car is through the screen. This is a huge upgrade. This just makes the car feel so much better, and it's just, gets them up to like the newer gen. It literally feels like an iPad. I'm not even kidding. It's so smooth. It's literally buttery smooth. It's incredible. Now, since you do everything through the screen, the UI is actually very intuitive. It's not something that you're gonna have to like learn too much. It's basically like, learning a new smartphone. Yes, it takes some time maybe initially, but once you get the hang of it, it's really, really intuitive. It's great, really. And because Tesla does these over-the-air software updates, they can add new features. So you can see that there's actually plenty of games now that you can actually play, and there's a massive collection of them actually. It's incredible. And then you can actually go into the theater, which you can watch Netflix, YouTube, I think even Twitch is there, Disney Plus. Like, it's a lot. And with the new processor, you can actually just use them. In the old processor, it took forever to just load the apps. Like, for example, loading YouTube took forever, but with the new one, oh my god, it's so much faster. It's insane. And it just literally feels like you're on a phone or a tablet or something like that. It's incredible. Now talking about the interior, you can see that you can find a very comfortable position in the driver's seat and in the passenger seat. You got plenty of room. Like, this car is incredibly spacious. The seat has a lot of travel for our settings, so you can be a short person and get comfortable, and you can be a very tall person and still be comfortable. Now, one of the things that I don't like is when you hop into the back. The back seats are a bit too low to the ground, so your knees are a bit too high and you don't get that much leg room. Now, for me, being 5'11", that sure you can say it's a problem, but for maybe someone who's shorter, they could probably fit behind themselves. It's a bit tight in the back. It's not something that you'd want to do often or for like long road trips, especially if you're tall. Headroom-wise, both the seats are fine, front and back. You got plenty of headroom. And along with the flat floor, you can actually fit pretty much 3 people in the back in a reasonable comfort level. Now we go back to the storage space. So the trunk is actually quite big. The problem is the opening isn't that big. So if you want to fit really large items, you got to make sure that they actually fit in, but it has a lot of storage options. So trying to fit maybe bigger boxes or something, that will be a difficulty. It'll be harder. For that, you might want to look at a Model Y, which has a much bigger opening because it's a hatchback, and it has way more storage space because it's a bigger car. But nonetheless, you still got plenty of storage space on the sides, even under the trunk. There is an incredible amount of storage in this vehicle. Then you also have a frunk, which is quite small compared to all the other Tesla models, but it's not like it's unusable or anything. You can still fit a decent amount of stuff in there, probably a backpack or something. And so it's actually quite good. Maybe you can keep like your dirty shoes or something that smell so you don't stink up the cabin. In that way, the frunk becomes incredibly useful even though it's quite small. So here I plugged in at about 55%, and just saying this battery was pretty much cold soaked, and I just plugged in the destination. It probably had maybe 20 minutes of preheating, and it's still getting 113 kilowatts. I think I just hit 121 and then started ramping down from there. This is actually pretty good considering we're at a high state of charge and it was a pretty cold day. I mean, relatively cold. It was about 10 degrees, I believe, and 7 degrees as it says on the screen. And I'm still getting 112 kilowatts while not preheating that much. This is one of the best things about the supercharger network. And now, look at this. 7 a.m. in the morning, it is completely empty. There's no one here. Now, obviously, this was a Saturday, so it's not busy at all. But the car charged in about, I think, 20-25 minutes. It charged all the way up from 55% to 89%. The Tesla supercharger network is one of the best, most valuable assets that Tesla actually has. And if it wasn't for the supercharger network, recommending a Tesla to anyone would be a very difficult decision, especially here in Canada. driving the vehicle, it felt quite quiet, very well put together, and overall it just felt like it had better sound deadening than, you know, some people online tell you about. Maybe this is an upgrade that they did in the 2022 model or something, but it was definitely something that felt pretty high-end. It didn't feel like a cheap car or anything, and the materials all felt really nice. So there's been complaints saying the suspension for the Model 3 is a bit harsh. I personally didn't find it too harsh. It felt a good balance between very sporty and very comfortable. Like, if you hit a pothole, it absorbs a pothole pretty well. It's not like air suspension, of course, but it's not uncomfortable. You can easily do long journeys with this and not feel tired, considering the seats are especially very, very comfortable. It's one of the best seats that I've sat in. They're really comfortable. It's just hard to explain how comfortable they really are. And that probably adds into the fact that the seats combined with the suspension make this a car that you would really want to drive for long periods of time in and not get tired. Now, adding to that, you have Autopilot. Now, Autopilot is kind of a mixed bag. Depending on who you ask, they're like, yeah, it's kind of cool, but it's also kind of shitty. And that's kind of true. Now, in my opinion, I think Autopilot is incredibly useful because if you're going on the highway or just any long road trip or anything like that, you just boop boop, turn it on, let it drive you. And it does a really good job. And in fact, it does such a good job that people become overconfident with it, which is kind of like a bad thing, but just tells you that how good of a job Autopilot actually does. It literally drives similar to a human. Now, this car does not have the radar version of Autopilot, so it's just pure vision, and it drives incredibly smooth. It's really incredible. One thing I didn't like is sometimes when you turn on the turn signal to change lanes, it will cut off very quickly. It won't try to like do it again. It would just give up very easily sometimes, especially in traffic situations. But other than that, it felt really good. It's like just driving like a human, and it's a system that I think might actually be worth it. Now, for $12,000 USD, I'm not entirely sure if it's that worth it. If you drive a lot, probably more worth it. If you don't drive much, probably not worth it at all. Now, that being said, you still get base Autopilot included with every car. So it's not like you're missing out on much, really. It's mostly just lane changes that help you out currently, until we get the FSD beta, obviously. But it's just lane changes. So other than that, it still keeps you in your lane. It does everything that it needs to do, keeps distance from the car in front, and it does an incredible job. Like, it's really good. It's dead center, locked in. It's not like one of those other systems, if you've used, where they kind of bounce around in the lane. It's dead straight, dead smooth, very confident, and maybe a bit too overconfident, because it gives you a false sense of security. Now, this is not a fully autonomous system, so that is key. It's still in work in progress, but it's not a fully autonomous system just yet. So you do have to pay attention. Sometimes there's like a blue light that pops up on the screen that tells you, hey, wiggle the wheel a little bit, and that's pretty much it. Now, as for the driving aspects, this car drives incredibly well. Like, it's pretty much a sports car if you really think about it. It's kind of heavy, yes, you can almost feel the weight, but they do a really good job at hiding it. So it has a really low center of gravity, and you can actually feel that while driving. It pretty much corners like it's on rails. That's the best explanation I can give. There's no other way to describe it, really. Now, as for acceleration, that's where it kind of falls off. Now, this car is slower than the older cars by, I think, 0.5 seconds. So it's not that much, but it's quite a bit, and you can feel it. Now, the biggest difference is if you floor it from a stop, it takes like a while. It barely moves and then it slowly ramps up. But if you're going 30, 40 kilometers an hour, then you floor it, then yes, you do get like that kickback and you actually feel like it's very nice. So what I would describe it as, it's not slow, but it's not exhilaratingly fast. Maybe if you're not used to it, I guess you could say kind of fast, but it's not exhilaratingly fast like their other top-end models. So driving this car around is actually very nice. Now, one thing I don't like about this car driving around is the turning circle. It's not that good, frankly speaking. So if you live in like tight neighborhoods or something and you need to make tight turns, you actually have to make more turns. Sometimes even making a 3-point turn turns into like a 5-point turn. So that's like one thing you have to be careful of. But other than that, it feels great and it just drives like a sports car. It's a really good car. It's an incredibly good car. Now, personally, I think, because I've driven both the Model 3 and the Model Y, I think the Model Y is a much better car. So if you're thinking of getting like a Model 3 long range or something, maybe just get the Model Y long range. It's a few $1,000s more and you get way more practicality with it. It still has the same sportiness feel. It feels a bit heavier, yes, you can feel the weight, but it is still very sporty. It's incredibly sporty and it's very fast and it has plenty of range. Like, range was never an issue with the Model Y, and I'll maybe make a review on it later in the future. But yeah, that's been it. Definitely worth a try. Model 3, standard range or rear-wheel drive. It's a great car. It's a great car and you should definitely go ahead, try it out, and even buy it if you are thinking about it. That's been it. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.